So I think I've completely played out the joke about not wanting to talk about COVID-19. But Tony Spell definitely doesn't want to stop talking about it. It is currently his most favorite flavor of persecution. So, let's talk about that.
The sun is falling in the sky beyond, and light is fading from our world. Now's the time of reckoning. The final battle has begun.
What's up guys, Suris here. Today is going to be a little shorter video than normal. I know that's not really what everybody wants. Everybody loves long form content. Or at least that's what the YouTube algorithm gods tell me. I just have a thing to talk about real quick, and I've got a small announcement to make. If you are into video games in any way, shape, or form, I am doing the full-on launch of my gaming channel over on, well, my gaming channel. The first video is going to be about the Resident Evil 3 remake. I'll be releasing a video there every 1 to 2 weeks, but they're going to be long-form video essays. So if that's your jam, then bread on over. And while you're contemplating killing me for that pun, let's get into the fan art section. First, we have me screaming at BGR by Zakafar. Then we have me telling everybody to stop by Skylark. And then we have something I'd probably draw my therapist to tell them about my emotional state by Skytama. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions, and they are definitely not my daily dose of insanity. But speaking of different levels of insanity, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're going to be talking about Tony Spell. Now, this is a guy that I actually didn't know much about until he was brought to my attention by RCA. You might know him on YouTube as Reformed Christian Apologist. Now, he did his own video on Tony Spell, and I might be doing more than just the one video on him as well. But first, we probably need to talk about the thing that brought him to my attention to begin with. And that is the fact that Tony is a bit of a public safety hazard. Now, of course, we've seen on this channel and in other places preachers who are incredibly upset about the COVID-19 lockdowns and have been arguing to open up the economy and everything else as fast as possible. Now, obviously, there are some people who've done this like Kenneth Copeland who are just wanting you to tithe more and more, but then there are people like Tony who I think actually want to accelerate the doom of the human race. That's because it's one thing to be willfully ignorant about how pandemics work and try to make sure that everybody is outside of their houses and in your congregation, thus getting everyone else sick, but it's another thing entirely to clog up the lines for your local police force, thus making any actual defense from your police operatives severely less effective. How is he doing this? Well, our pastor buddy boy down in Louisiana decided that he wanted to keep holding his services at his actual church. Guy apparently didn't hear about things like Discord and Zoom. Those must be completely foreign to him. What this either lack of technical know-how or inability to conform to any type of public safety has actually led to, though, is Tony Spell being put under house arrest, because not only is he ignoring lockdown, he is getting hundreds of people to ignore lockdown as well, and thus cause greater harm. Ideally, I shouldn't have to explain to anybody how this is actually perfectly acceptable under the First Amendment of the Constitution. It does specifically say peaceably assemble, and during a public pandemic, there is no peaceable assembly. Every assembly is dangerous. Now, Tony, he happens to be the pastor at Life Tabernacle Church. He has been requested to conduct his services online. As I said before, he has decided not to do that. Now, while being at house arrest means that this should be a perfect opportunity for him to hold those services online, he has instead decided to tell his entire congregation, which consists of hundreds of people, to constantly harass the police, asking them to free Tony Spell. Now, under normal circumstances, this isn't exactly the worst thing in the world. This is because most free X-person campaigns happen over places like Facebook, Twitter. Sometimes people make a change.org petition in order to get people to try to do things. They sometimes go into the fundraising category for this. But no, in his infinite wisdom, Tony has decided to be the biggest nuisance to his police department he possibly can. After being arrested on April 21st on charges including aggravated assault after an incident where he drove his church bus towards a man protesting his decision to hold church services, after the police had of course cited him multiple times for violating shelter-in-place orders, Tony decided he was going to get a little miffed. At his house, he is saying lovely things like God gave you an immune system to kill the virus, which means he doesn't seem to actually understand how immune systems work. Now, after being put under house arrest, which if that has ever happened to you, you get this lovely little ankle bracelet that tells the police if you happen to actually leave your residence. Tony decided that this house arrest wasn't for him, and he ended up going to his local church and trying to preach there as well, even showing off his anklet to the people in his congregation. According to legal documents about the case, Pastor Spell spent over 7 hours at the church on Sunday while wearing his lovely bit of ankle jewelry. This, of course, is in violation of the court's order, because if you're under house arrest, you should be, arrested in your home. This is is of course much better and more comfortable than being in a jail cell. So after ignoring court orders and now being told that his bail will probably not be a thing he can even do because he's being held in contempt of court, what else does lovely little Tony decide to do to be a nuisance to his local law enforcement and his local community, over and above, of course, getting hundreds of people sick? I started talking about COVID-19 on this channel by going after the Shincheonji Church, so we all know what this kind of behavior leads to in the long run. This Louisiana pastor has now told his followers to jam up the police phone lines in order to protest his arrest. Like I said before, these kind of nuisances usually happen over things like Facebook or over Twitter, and in some cases they are perfectly viable. I'm not trying to hold the police up on a pedestal. They are not perfect people. In many ways, it can even be argued that they are an extended branch of systemic oppression, but that's not the conversation we're having today. Today, Tony is saying that his congregants will keep on clogging up the phone lines, making any type of response to local law enforcement essentially impossible until they get the ankle bracelet off of him. So in true whiny privileged snowflake fashion, playing by the rules that everyone else has to play by is not what he wants to do. He would rather play by his own set of rules that operate under the paradigms that he thinks are most apt instead of the ones for the society that he is living in. A full-on denial of reality. So let's explain some of the problems with this, because I know there are some people in my audience who are very against the police, and I can understand that position. In some ways, I hold it. But let's talk about some of the things that police can do normally that they cannot now. Let's say you and an abusive husband, for instance, are stuck at home for much longer periods of time. In fact, we've actually seen that since the COVID-19 outbreak, rates of domestic violence have significantly shot up. This is, of course, because locking people in the same house with their abusers has a pretty negative side effect on that situation. That's already an unfortunate reality to live in, and it sucks, and I feel for the people who live in that reality. But let's talk about how worse that reality is now with this Pastor Tony being a nuisance to his community. Let's say your abusive spouse ends up getting violently drunk. Now, not only do you have to deal with the verbal abuse and the sometimes physical abuse, now they can't control themselves. You are officially in danger. I mean, you've always been in danger, but now it's a little worse. In fact, it's substantially worse. You call 911 and try to get in contact with your local police precinct and see if they can offer you any aid, get you out of there, get them sent to jail, something to protect you and your well-being. But the line's busy. All the lines are busy. There is no way to get a call through. Now, your only way out, because it is not always realistic to ask for family members to help in a situation like this. Not everybody has friends around them that can help in a situation like this. Abusers tend to use things like isolation to prevent that. Going ahead and letting that out of the way before any of you geniuses in the comment section try to talk about that. Your only real recourse here is to appeal to your local law enforcement to give you an out, give you some method of safety. But now, because one pastor is being a whiny little bitch and is crying his eyes out because he broke the law, now your husband, who when he tries to break your jaw will be breaking the law, can't actually be responded to in any way, shape, or form. There's no way for the police to know that this physical violence is happening. And if you've ever called the police on someone for any type of physical abuse they've levied at you after the fact, even a few days after the fact, they generally can't or won't do anything about the abuser. They have to be called when it is a safety issue at the time. I would know because I have been in a situation where I have had to make such a call, and because the call was made several days after the actual incident, the police were not able to, or again, wouldn't do anything in that situation whatsoever. They have to be called when the public safety measure is at a boiling point. While I don't necessarily agree with that system, the reality is that is the system that they are operating under right now. And because of that, in the situation where this spousal abuse happens, which is a reality many people are facing right now, because Pastor Tony Spell is too busy bitching about an ankle bracelet that he earned himself, he's convinced enough people that it is a good thing to clog up the police force and make it impossible for them to respond to issues of domestic violence. This is to say nothing about any other issues someone might be dealing in, like a robbery, break-in, some issue of child abuse, etc. All of these things are now put by the wayside because the police are too busy trying to tell Tony and his followers to please shut the fuck up. They can't do anything besides deal with this one situation because the congregation has made it impossible to go about this any other way. This is the point where I ask you guys, the audience, what do you think about a situation like this? What do you think should happen to Tony Spell? Should a similar type of harassment campaign happen against Tony, where his phone line is clogged so much that he can't think straight? Is what he's doing an actual good thing? Is he fighting for his individual rights in such a way that the well-being of anyone else in his community should just fall by the wayside as unimportant? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I know that for what it's worth, I think that this is an incredibly irresponsible thing to do. I think that solidarity with a person who you think has actually done no wrong, which mind you, in this case Tony has, is generally a positive thing. But when that solidarity manifests in such a way that you make it so that your entire community can no longer be considered a safe place, ideally someone would get to the point where they have to ask themselves, are we the baddies? Just like what's happened recently with all of the personal liberty protesters getting in front of hospitals, preventing patients from actually getting into the hospitals and aiming guns and all that other dumb shit. While I agree with their right to protest, and I agree with them being able to spout their opinion and have their freedom of speech and everything else, when you get to the point where you are endangering the safety of others, I start to personally wonder if you're the baddie. And if you're the baddie, why should I care about your plight? In Tony's case, I care not for his plight. I think that he's being irresponsible, stupid, and being a child. And because he wields a modicum of power, him having a childlike temper tantrum has real repercussions for the community around him. And hey, Tony, if you end up watching this video, maybe try being an adult instead of a little bitch. I'm sure a domestic abuse victim would thank you for that. With all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sure that this was not something that you wanted to see normally, but I had to get this off my chest, and I wanted to thank RCA again for bringing this to my attention. Please remember that the video that I talked about earlier in this one, the gaming video, that is going to be live on Sunday over on my gaming channel. The links to that are going to be in the description. Please go check that out. I would love for that video to have a good opening day. And remember to comment down below for this video and leave a like if you want to. If you don't, I understand. That said, as always everyone, insert end of video tagline here.